Right now, somewhere over your head, there's a machine cheaper to replace than to fix. Except you can't fix it. It's orbiting Earth. It costs more than some entire countries are worth, and if one tiny pump gives out, all of it turns into the most expensive scrap metal in the universe. That's the deal we keep making. Take billions of dollars, strap them to a controlled explosion, light the fuse, and pray. Over and over again. So which launches actually cost the most? Stick around, because number 1 makes everything else on this list look like pocket change. But first, you've got to understand why space is so brutally expensive. Getting a single kilogram off this rock costs a fortune, because you're fighting the strongest gravity humans can launch from. And once it's up there, no repair shop, no tech support, no do-overs. One bad second on the launch pad and years of work, billions of dollars, gone in a fireball. That's the bet every single thing on this list made. Number 10. The Cassini-Huygens probe. Around $3.9 billion, and it spent 7 years just flying to Saturn before it did anything. 7 years through nothing. If something broke on the way, tough. There was no one to call. But it made it. It studied Saturn's rings, found oceans hiding under the ice of its moons, and then, when it ran out of fuel, engineers deliberately crashed it into the planet so it wouldn't contaminate a thing. Almost $4 billion. Destroyed on purpose. Number 9. A single high-end spy satellite. We do not get exact numbers on these because they are secret. But the best ones, with mirrors that rival space telescopes, except pointed back down at you, can run well over $5 billion each. One satellite, more than a whole fleet of fighter jets, riding a rocket, where historically things go wrong more often than anyone likes to admit. Number 8. The Curiosity rover. The Curiosity rover was a nuclear-powered lab on Mars, costing about $2.5 billion, and getting it down was certifiably insane. It came screaming into the Martian atmosphere, deployed the biggest supersonic parachute ever built, and then a rocket-powered crane lowered it to the ground on cables before flying off to crash somewhere else on purpose. 7 minutes of pure terror. Mission Control could not do a single thing because the signal takes too long to reach Mars. By the time they knew it was landing, it had already either survived or become a $2.5 billion crater. Number 7. The Hubble Space Telescope. About $4.7 billion to build and launch. But here's where it gets wild. When it reached orbit, the pictures came back blurry. The main mirror was flawed. A multi-billion-dollar telescope, and it was nearsighted. So NASA flew astronauts up to install what was basically a giant pair of glasses. Add every servicing mission since, and the total blows past $10 billion. The most expensive eyeglasses in history. Number 6. The Chandra X-ray Observatory. Around $1.6 billion. And to see X-rays from black holes and exploding stars, its mirrors had to be polished so perfectly that if you scaled one up to the size of the United States, the tallest bump on it would be a few inches high. A few inches. Across an entire country. That precision was riding on a rocket that shakes hard enough to rattle your teeth loose. Number 5. The Galileo mission to Jupiter. About $1.6 billion, and this one nearly died on arrival. Its main antenna, the dish it needed to send everything home, only opened halfway. Stuck. Like a broken umbrella. So engineers reprogrammed the entire spacecraft from hundreds of millions of kilometers away to squeeze the whole mission through a tiny backup antenna instead. They pulled it off. Barely. One jammed part and $1 billion mission almost went completely silent. Number 4. Now we switch gears, because the expensive part isn't always the payload. Sometimes it's the ride. NASA's Space Launch System, the rocket itself. Each launch runs somewhere between $2 and $4 billion. Per flight. Not the whole program, per single launch. You light that thing once and you've burned more money than most companies make in a decade. And it's not reusable. The entire rocket gets thrown away every time. Number 3. The Space Shuttle. Each orbiter cost around $1.7 billion to build, but spread the full program cost across every flight it ever flew, and each launch works out to roughly $1.5 billion. And we lost 2 of them. With their crews. The shuttle was a marvel, the first reusable spacecraft, but it taught us a brutal lesson. Reusable does not mean cheap, and space never stops being dangerous. Number 2. The James Webb Space Telescope. Around $10 billion and more than 2 decades of work. This is the one that kept engineers up at night, because Webb had something terrifying. 344 single points of failure. 344 moments where, if just one did not work, the whole telescope was dead. Why so many? Webb was too big to fit in any rocket, so they folded it. Like origami, a telescope the size of a tennis court, crammed into a nose cone, designed to unfold itself 1 million miles from Earth, somewhere no human could ever reach it. When it launched, every person who had given 20 years to it held their breath through every single step. And somehow, it worked. Flawlessly. But for a few weeks there, $10 billion hung on motors the size of your fist, deploying perfectly in the cold and the dark. And now, number 1. The single most expensive thing humanity has ever built. The International Space Station. The price tag? Around $150 billion. Let that land. $150 billion. Everything else on this list combined does not come close. And here is the staggering part. You could not launch it in one piece. It was too big. So, over more than a decade, module by module, dozens of separate launches carried it up and bolted it together in orbit. 5 space agencies, more than a dozen countries. The most complex construction job ever attempted. All of it done while flying around the planet at 28,000 kilometers an hour. Every launch was its own multi-billion-dollar gamble. Any one of them failing could have crippled the whole thing. It is the most expensive object ever assembled anywhere, and it is right over your head circling Earth every 90 minutes. So step back and look at what all that money actually bought. Sounds insane, right? Hundreds of billions flung off the planet riding on explosions. But here's the thing, that spending taught us how to live up there, how to build, how to see the beginning of the universe and find oceans on other worlds. Every blurry mirror, every jammed antenna, every white-knuckle landing, it all added up to something we couldn't have learned any other way. And here's the part that should really mess with your head. All of this costs so much because launching used to cost a fortune, but that's changing fast. Reusable rockets are dropping the price of reaching space by a factor of 10, maybe more. Which means the records on this list, the ones that took decades and tens of billions to set, might not stand much longer. The next space stations and telescopes could do more for a sliver of the cost. So the most expensive thing in orbit today might be the last of its kind. The end of an era where only nations with bottomless budgets got to play. Now I'm curious, which one actually shocked you the most? The rover NASA crashed on purpose, the telescope they folded like origami, or that $150 billion station flying over your house right now? Drop it in the comments. And if you want more stories from the wild edge of what we're throwing at the sky, hit subscribe, because trust me, we're just getting started.